and it's
Well, so are you excited by Unleash to go?
Yeah, definitely. So is the cocktail hour in my calendar? Have we been invited?
You have. I don't know if we've done any invitations
Yeah,
yet.
it's not that you're not invited. We just locked it in.
We've been
Yeah.
working hard to find a place.
It'll be Tuesday. So I think we literally are just locking it in and signing all the fun paperwork that has to go for something like that.
Yeah.
We got a little wine and cheese.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
It'll be small. It's not going to be as fancy as others, but we'll have some interesting characters for sure.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun. I'm looking forward to Unleash.
Yeah.
This is, I think, was it on the podcast? The last podcast we did, Jerry, we were talking about this is kind of the return to, I think, the first full sort of return to post-pandemic conferencing for a lot of us.
Yeah, it is. And you've got a nice panel.
Yeah.
I've got a judging thing, so I just close my eyes and listen to what all the other weirdos who are judges are going to do, and then try to do the opposite or something. I don't know.
Let's see. I have Wells Fargo. I've Joanna Clark from Wells Fargo. We have Melissa Thompson from Ford. We have Yvette Stortz from CVS Health on my panel, and we're going to be talking about transformation within TA. And if there were ever a group of professionals that know a little bit about transformation in TA, it's the journey those three have been on.
Yeah, I think that'll work. Danielle would have been great, but I think she's enjoying herself in South Africa right now.
So she's always somewhere. I keep looking for pictures of her with a fish, or but I think she may still be there. We may still see Danny there. And Caitlin, when do you get in?
That's a very good question. It's happening soon.
You're as bad as I am. If it is not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. No, I cannot remember anything. Exactly. It has to be written down.
Well, the thing is that I'm also going to PSYOP the week after. So it's even just remembering which one comes first. So, okay, Unleash comes the week before PSYOP. So that's good to know. So I think, no. PSYOP happens and then Unleash is the week after. So I get into on the Tuesday night.
Got it. The Tuesday.
So I get in, there's the time difference. So like 3 o'clock Vegas time on Tuesday.
Good. Well, then you're just going to have to drop your stuff and come to the cocktail hour. We're from 4:30 to 6:30. So
yeah.
Oh yeah, it is Tuesday night. Okay. Yeah. No, I will come straight to.
I'll make sure you're there.
We're actually speaking so I'm interviewing our customer from Whirlpool on stage in front of everybody. He's got a PhD in IO psychology. And then we have Dr. Neil Christensen on stage with us as well. So it's really cool.
I'm looking forward to hearing about it. I think the first time it really hit my radar was a couple of years ago. And I think last year we had a industry friend came back with a bunch of interesting insights. So it should be fun to hear.
I think it's important for assessment to be there. I really do, because the IOs are really good influencers inside the company. There's not a single check writer there, but there are influencers, so that's a good thing.
The thing that I've always found surprising, and I think we'll be able to talk about this, is I just don't understand the divide. I don't understand how you've got this conference with, Society of Industrial Organizational Psychology, which is the study of work and humans in work, and understanding the humans, and then you've got HR, and they don't
talk, and they don't share information.
Never the two shall meet. Yeah,
and there's this barrier, and that's really been it's kind of the heart of nobody talks about that. There's so many things that we agree on and have a similar perspective on and different expertise to pull on, but it's not being treated like this is an opportunity. Anyway, it's very interesting to walk into this and be in both worlds and not see the worlds talking to each other and not seeing the worlds being respected by each other and not seeing that this is like, we need to come together. If the type of change that we're all trying to create post-pandemic world is going to happen, it's going to take this kind of collaboration.
Yeah. I was there with a couple IO psych folks on a panel talking about the data we were collecting from the Candidate Experience Awards. And the PhDs in the room were going, holy shit, you had how many? You had what? And they were just blown away by the data that we had. But then, they don't do anything. They don't go back and deal with it, so.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about assessments. We're going to talk about that. Are we ready? Are we ready to jump in?
Yeah.
All right, let's hit the button. Let's go.
Welcome to the CXR channel, our premier podcast for talent acquisition and talent management. Listen in as the CXR community discusses a wide range of topics focused on attracting, engaging, and retaining the best talent. We're glad you're here.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Hoyt, your host for the next half an hour or so of Recruiting Community. And I've got with me my soulmate, Jerry Crispin. Jerry, how are you today?
I'm just fabulous today.
So we have an interesting topic today. Before we jump in, though, I want to do a quick share out and a reminder to anybody who's joining us. We are typically streaming on the YouTube, the Twitter, the Facebook, the LinkedIn, and of course, cxr.work/podcast. You can check us out there. You can also subscribe on any of the other places that you may listen. So be sure to listen and like and do all that good stuff that helps us promote this. This is an interesting labor of love for us. This is the episode 300 and some odd. So we're supposedly getting proficient at this or an expert at this. I forget how that works, the hours that we've put in. But it is a labor of love. This does not generate any revenue. Nobody pays to be here. It is because we invite folks who are here doing cool stuff, who we think are super smart, or maybe even just super funny. We probably have a little bit of that, both of that today, which I'm super stoked about because we got a fun topic today, assessments. We're going to talk a little bit about assessments and what those kind of mean, because we got a lot of folks that are sort of working through those. But Jerry, before we do that, I want to share, we had an update that came out on the community this week, on the CXR community this week, called Networks. And this, I'm super pumped about this. So if you are a CXR member, whether alumni or a current member, and you are registered on the site, if you're not, shame on you, go register. But if you're registered on the site, now within your profile, there is a dynamically created by ChatGPT. There is a dynamically created, it's not ChatGPT, but it's a networking feature. So if you have, if you're in the same city as someone within, I think we have 4,500 some odd people that are registered alumni and current members. If you're in the same city, you're going to pop up with like an Austin link there, and you're going to see all of your counterparts that are in Austin or in Texas or in New Jersey, or no longer New Jersey, where you may be. It also will dynamically update for folks who have been to our online meetings, or if you have been to a live meeting, like we just recently did the marketing and branding, you can easily click that and see everybody that's connected there, job title, areas of interest, and so on and so forth. That is a big update this week that I'm pretty stoked about.
It's great. I love it.
Yeah, super chatty today. Jerry is super chatty. He's ready. He's ready in chatted up mode. Okay, well, let's jump in. So we have a fantastic guest today. I don't believe it is her first time on the show. Caitlin, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we love having you on. So let's do this. For those who may not know who Caitlin MacGregor is, why don't you give us kind of that escalator pitch? So kind of give a little bit of a background, a minute or two, to just kind of give us some reference point for the conversation we're going to have and why they should be paying attention to what you say today.
So my name is Caitlin MacGregor. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Plum. And we have taken best-in-class industrial organizational psychology and married it with technology so that we can scale to every candidate and every employee and really understand the human behind the work and use data that is 4 times more accurate than a resume at predicting on-the-job success and increasing retention and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I love that. And how long have you been doing that work, Caitlin?
It's been just over a decade.
How's that feel?
amazing. We have incredible proof points and reference customers that are singing our praises. We were just on the cover of the business section of the New York Times. And we've got some incredible case studies to reference, as well as new ones coming out. And so, when we're talking about the science, you need the track record and the history and the evidence to show the proof. And so it feels really good to have all of that, and to have, we're in 26 countries globally with large global enterprise customers. So it takes time to get there, and it feels really good. It feels like the market, every conversation that we have, it's not about assessments. It's about the labor crisis and how to solve for the fact that there's not enough skilled talent and you can't hold on to the talent you have. And it feels really good to know that Plum can solve for the macro conditions that every company is trying to figure out how to solve for.
I love that. I see. Oh, go ahead, Jerry.
No, I was just going to say, it's the science issue. We tend to think of our profession as art and science, but unfortunately, in most places, the art is way more than the science. And fundamentally, we need a better balance, especially in that choke point of where we select, as well as where the candidate selects. And I'm just a fan of the fact that we need better tools to do that.
Thank you.
It is interesting. I just had this conversation with the head of HR a few days ago, where the conversation of like, where does the art and science argument, like is it a spectrum for every job, or is it, all the way to chef, right? Which was kind of the topic that got it started, not just in recruiting and talent acquisition, but how much science is there really? How much art is there really? How much do we credit to art, but it's actually science that's learned behavior for us, that sort of thing. So the idea of doing assessments for talent, I think, can be super interesting for a TA leader, or could be petrifying. Like, it could really scare the shit out of you, and you're not, you're necessarily not sure what to do. Caitlin, not from a Plum perspective, but from a Caitlin MacGregor, expert in the space, decade, talking about this stuff perspective, what would you tell a TA leader who's sort of thinking about assessments and doesn't really know much about them other than like a Hogan, right? That's the type of thing they're familiar with.
I think there's so many things to say, but I think a really great place to start is on common ground that I think I don't think there's a single talent acquisition leader that would disagree that structured interviews, we can all agree that when it comes to art and science, structured interviews is something that everyone will say, yes, a rigorous structured interview process, that's critical for success. Nobody's like, nope, we don't need that anymore. Everyone will say, if we want to make sure that we are being fair and equitable, we're going to have structured interviews as part of the process. So we can all agree with that. Where the difference of opinion starts to happen is, what are you doing before that structured interview? So if we all agree that common ground, that's a necessary process, then the question is, who are you using your valuable human hours on in that structured interview? And in the age of ChatGPT, you can take your resume and you can take a job description and say, give me the perfect cover letter and the perfect resume that'll get me to that structured interview. That's not, we've known for a long time that resumes were something that was designed over 100 years ago to, show you that top, 3% or 5% of the population that had gone to university and all those things. We know that, resumes don't work in 2023, but we're terrified on what's the alternative. And so then we go to technology and say, okay, well, we're going to let technology automate it. But if you look at every job board, applicant tracking system, human capital management system, the way that they are deciding who gets to go to that structured interview is some form of resume parsing and taking a bag of keywords from a resume and matching it to a bag of keywords from a job description, which now with ChatGPT can be completely gamed. And so it's really about, let's pause and look at, in 2023, what are our options of getting people to that structured interview process, and what is the most objective, fairest, most scientifically valid to ensure that you're having the right conversations with the right people. And most people don't think about assessments that way. They start with Myers-Briggs and what they know about Myers-Briggs or a DISC assessment. And so it's helpful to take a step back and say, okay, in World War II, assessments were created to help as men re-entered the workforce after coming back from the war, how to get along with women that had taken over their jobs. That's where things started. And that's where Myers-Briggs was developed. That's where DISC assessments came out of. A lot has changed since then. Please stop making that the benchmark for how we think about assessments in 2023. Like, that's like saying, your understanding of a telephone is like a can with a wire, with a string in between. Like that's not fair anymore. So the big part is we need to let go of that being our perception, because yes, I will agree with every single person. Myers-Briggs is not supported by any third party. It is not peer reviewed. It is not scientifically accurate. Their own website says you can't use it for selection. So while it might be nice and fun to do and maybe have an interesting conversation between you and your colleague, it's not science. Things like DISC are incredibly outdated. So it's really important to look at what's the gold standard that has been put in place in the last 30 years where there's consensus, and really look at the field. Industrial organizational psychology is the science of human behavior in the workplace. And it's a real science, and there's really, really strong proven gold standards on what works. And now it's about, now that we know this, how do we make it accessible and actionable? And that's the challenge.
So I guess, I love the passion. I guess what I'm asking is, if historically, right, a lot of those tests have been reserved for sort of the executive level, right? Like I remember taking one of those and figuring out I was a red penguin. And this was supposed to be my sorry about that. Like I don't know what to do with that other than, to your point, like I'm supposed to hang out with blue birds, like I'm supposed, whatever the other, animals and colors and quadrants were. But so what I think I hear you saying is, we don't have to just keep assessments at the executive level anymore. We can do away with the basic keyword stuff that we've been doing for years, how we know to look for the best candidate in our platforms. Are you saying at every level? Are you saying if I'm going to really take this on, am I doing away with the profiles completely and resumes? Should everybody that's going to come into my org take one of these?
Okay. So all really, really, really great questions. I have to address the red penguin. I can't not. So, in the last 40 years, as we start to get consensus around what is the best way of doing this, you ended up in another trap where, you have all of these people that understand the science behind it, these PhDs in industrial organizational psychology, but they're trying to figure out how to make it actionable. And the reality is the entire industry was spun up around consulting services and using assessments to basically support consulting services. And the business model of consulting services is, I'm not going to make this super easy because then you won't need me anymore. I need to make this complex so I can charge big dollars and then I have a business. And so what happened is, because it was so expensive, it got relegated to, executive roles, or it got relegated into positions that are high volume where you only need to do an analysis for a single job, but you're hiring hundreds or thousands of people into that job. In that model, to match somebody to a job, it's 140 hours of analysis, which means benchmarking, figuring out how to match somebody to a role would be $20,000 to $25,000 per position. So everything that was designed kind of 30, 40 years ago, it was never meant to scale by design. And then you started having technology companies popping up and they're like, oh, let's make this so it can scale. And they cut a shitload of corners. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to jump in, but, because they wanted to make it so accessible. But in trying to make it so accessible, take 2 minutes clicking on pretty pictures or, popping bubbles, they cut out so much of the science that it wouldn't work for enterprise companies that have huge obligations to follow, compliance and, regulations. And so you had these two spectrums of very expensive and very convoluted. You need a special decoder ring to understand it. And then you had these really oversimplified, technology solutions that, could scale and were fun, but not scientific. And so to answer your question, it's that you've got to jump into the last decade and say, are there providers out there that are taking the best in class in the science and really sticking to that? You can put this in front of 1,000 industrial organizational psychologists and they'll be like, yep, they're following best practices. Is there the technical manual? And is it accessible? Can it scale? Can it provide value? Have they democratized access to this data so it looks like something designed for 2023?
So, boy, that's just a mouthful. I just love it. It's if I unpack pieces of it, it's does the candidate understand what it is you're doing, right? That's face validity from that point of view. And most IO psychologists in the past have just ignored that. Does the candidate believe that this has anything to do with the job that I might be interested in working for? So one aspect of that is that, in terms of that, and really the other is exactly what you said, is that in order to make money, it's got to be complicated, and somebody has to unpack it to be able to better understand at all levels. We all have a responsibility to understand whether it's reliable, whether or not, if I took the test twice, would I get two totally different answers to this?
My penguin colors.
Yeah. And it can't be any more predictive than it is reliable. So if its reliability is like 1 in 10, it's only going to predict 1 in 10, and you could flip a coin and get better odds than that. So I'm just a fan of the fact that we are starting to rekindle, if you will, an interest in using science to supplement, if you will, what we know we need to be doing in recruiting. And fundamentally, it does mean that we're going to be upskilling recruiters, upskilling TA leaders.
Sure.
We're going to have to partner with people who understand IO psych, and especially in large companies where we have volume.
So, Caitlin, let me ask you. So, Jerry and I we're joking saying Chat GPT's in everything lately. Like, we're not really here. These are our chatbots, but it is pushing, and we know that it's going to continue to push exponentially, like change, right? And a shift in how people do things on a couple of different levels. Would you say the same in the assessment space from an automation standpoint, or would you say that it will accelerate the interest in assessments because of that? I mean, is it one way over the other?
The latter. So, right now, take a step into looking at those structured interviews, mm-hmm. right? So the need for those in like live structured interviews are going to get more and more emphasis because everything else around it might be gamed. So then it's like, okay, well, how do we decide who comes into that structured interview? The great thing about assessments that are done right and are following all these best practices is that you can get almost the same level of accuracy from an assessment as you can from a structured interview, which means the assessment can be given to every single candidate or every single employee if you're looking at internal mobility, so that you can then screen in the right people to then go to that structured interview. So as the data from resumes becomes more, it's always been crap, but as the rest of the world starts to realize with ChatGPT that you can't rely on it, it'll move towards, okay, what is objective, fair, predictive data that we can use to bring the right people into structured interviews. And that is why you're seeing an increase in interest and an increase in spend in assessments.
The one thing that I'm loving in this conversation is, if you're right, and I think you are, the
data says that it's going this way.
The data says we're going to do this, but I love the emphasis on structured interviews, because I will tell you that if I took 5 people who say they know structure or give structured interviews.
Mhm.
I will get 5 different definitions, 5 different methods for creating that structured interview, some of which will, and most of which will embody part of what is probably in your mind when, if I asked you to define exactly how all that should take place. But fundamentally, we're going to have to set standards in our profession for what a structured interview should entail. What are the critical elements? How do we get to those critical elements? And how do, so that we could reliably do a structured interview at any point in time.
But I want to make sure we're saying and hearing the same thing. So is the data showing us that assessments on the front end lead to better structured interviews, behavioral interviews, or is the data saying these assessments can be done instead of having to do structured interviews?
Neither. What it's saying is that, if you get 1,000 people, everybody will say, I don't have time. I'm not giving more than a few seconds to each resume, which means I'm probably using some sort of resume parsing,
Yep.
right? And I'm looking at a short list of resumes to then decide who's going to come in for a structured interview. When you use an assessment that's looking at people's transferable innate talents like innovation, communication, execution, and how they align to the behavioral needs of a job, which is effectively what we're trying to get at, we're saying that data, that alignment between what somebody naturally is good at and what is naturally needed in the job, that when you find that match and you have somebody that's like a 99 match or a 98 match or 80 match, what's happening is that you're getting a short list of people that you're looking at that's completely different than what they've done historically. And what we're trying to say is, like, you may have things like, I need somebody that has 10 years of experience in our industry with a competitor doing X, Y, and Z.
Right.
They may have all of that, but they were a shit performer, but they have all of that and they'll get through to do the structured interview. With ChatGPT and things like that, they'll be able to check a lot of boxes and maybe squeeze through where they couldn't have before. With something that is an assessment, you're going to now see people that maybe have 5 years of experience and maybe worked in a different industry, but are a 99 match, meaning if you gave them 3 months of additional on-the-job training or 6 months on the job training, they may actually be able to outperform that person with 10 years of experience. And you may be able to pay them less, and you may be able to actually get them to stay in that job for now twice as long or 3 times as long, because they are grateful that you brought them into that industry at 5 years instead of that person that was at 10 years. And so you're interviewing. Your structured interview is you're interviewing completely different people. And it's not that other data doesn't matter, but you're seeing people at the top and then using your judgment. Is 5 years actually okay if they have 99?
You're seeing the people that the system that we've been using forever favors. So it occurs to me as you're saying that this will also greatly diversify ideally that pool of people that gets whittled down for you in advance.
It changes the way that we reorder the funnel. And so that funnel typically gets whittled down by humans who are screening very quickly on the basis of their bias to get to what they think are a smaller pool of folks who we should spend more time or energy on. And somewhere in there might be an assessment. But fundamentally, what I'm hearing from Caitlin is we could be doing this at the top of the funnel or closer to the top of the funnel, and fundamentally then be operating more seriously with a structured approach with fewer people, but a better band of those who would be more successful.
Well, and less bias.
Less bias, so therefore more diverse.
Yeah, like we've taken out like 50% of where we typically apply the biases.
Exactly. And think about it. This doesn't just apply. I mean, we talk about talent acquisition often as if we are sourcing outside the organization, but more and more TA leaders are in a position where they can source internally with their existing employees. And think about it, all the time when people get to senior levels, they'll be like, oh, they've been in marketing for a decade, but we need somebody in HR to help us with employee branding. Now we're going to pull somebody from a totally different background and a totally different department and pull them into a new role, and they excel. But it's so hard to be able to do that unless you have kind of that network effect of that hiring manager knows somebody that referred them, and it's all about who you know internally sometimes to get those cross-departmental opportunities. But this is what we need to increase retention in 2023 is people want those growth opportunities. So when you have this assessment data, you can now match people internally to your open roles that don't fit the traditional, past experience check marks, but have those transferable soft skills that'll allow them to perform if just given the opportunities.
So when you go to ISO, are you going to be doing some case studies relative to essentially that happening? So
PSYOP?
Yeah.
To the PSYOP conference?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on stage with Whirlpool talking about their success. So they increased, retention by 77%. They increased their hiring of underrepresented minorities to 78%. And so we'll be talking about the impacts on DE&I, the impacts of being able to screen in people they weren't looking at before and increasing retention, and talking about using this also to identify leadership potential. Nothing about past experience actually predicts if you're going to be a successful people leader. It's all about these innate talents and whether or not you are actually, do you want to solve the problem yourself, or do you want to help other people and help them with their problems and be a people leader. And you can assess for all of that very early in people's careers.
I think PSYOP will be a good practice for then doing that same case study with some of the TA leaders who are in a position to actually use the data.
But I have a question for that, because I'm going to come at it sideways. So I had a talk with a leader literally yesterday, who her passion is internal mobility. And we talked for about an hour about what that means at an organization. And I think she and I agreed that one of the biggest challenges to internal mobility is the cultural issue of stealing my talent. It's not the company's talent, it's my team, et cetera. Caitlin, I'm just curious, implementing something like this internally, have you seen if having the data, having an assessment like this helps with that cultural challenge at all? Or is that that challenge is just going to be there until it gets addressed?
The bigger business problem right now is the amount of money that is being lost by the company on employee turnover. It's 11 billion alone in the US that is lost every year on employee turnover. You saw in November, the Amazon leaked documents. They're losing 8 billion a year on employee turnover. There isn't a single level of role where they have better than 30%, retention. And so they're losing 70% of the people. So there's a, at the boardroom table, at the executive table, there's a massive crisis that they're just trying to hold on to their people. The best way to hold on to your people is to provide development. And part of that development and growth is new opportunities within the organization. So the need of the organization is now becoming a bigger priority than the individual managers that are trying to make sure that they keep hitting their targets and getting rewarded by holding on and boarding their people. There is this sentiment of change that, the talent is the IP of the company. It is up to the company to maximize its people, and it's not about the manager's need. It's about how do we hold on to these people. And I'd say this part of the power balance, like post-pandemic world, people can shop around and find jobs without changing geographic locations. It's easier than ever. And so companies are having to change in order to keep up with this. And the message is very, very clear. If you can capture better development opportunities and internal mobility opportunities for your employees, it'll dramatically improve your retention. And that's identifying diverse leaders early on and providing those opportunities where they wouldn't have get them elsewhere. It's a holistic process of really looking at, and the other part of it came up earlier, is that a lot of solutions in HR tech, in the talent management space especially, have always been top down. It's about the manager, it's about HR, and the employees are kind of recipients of programming. A lot of solving this is actually empowering the individual so that they see the opportunities. They are empowered to take more steps for growth and development and put their hand up for internal opportunities. So by empowering the individuals to have that value, you're also kind of removing that gating factor of the manager being the one to recommend them, or the manager, putting their name forward. So there's an ability to involve the employees more in the process, removing some of those previous gating problems.
Yeah, I wonder if it's early on to know that if bringing in the technology like that and data like that helps to sort of squash that mentality, right? That feeling of that, that piece, which of course leads to all kinds of other cool things like, succession planning and got to have your bench and internal development and training. I think, Jerry, early on when the pandemic, I think between the murder of George Floyd and the pandemic really getting, turned on at organizations, I think we were saying there were a couple of areas that if everybody focused on, if they really doubled down on at that time, would have benefited them coming out. And here we are. But it was going to be internal mobility, and it was going to be learning and development at that point.
And it is, and it will continue to be. And the cultural, I wouldn't call it cultural. There's embedded policies that are no longer useless, of value. They're outmoded approaches that basically say, how long should a person be in a job before I allow them to move to another
time
job?
And title, time and grade. Yeah,
time and grade. And those things support those managers' attitudes and behaviors that relate to, this is my person for as long as I want them, 2 years, and I'm not ready to let them go, etc. And it should not be their decision. It should have to do with what the company is attempting to accomplish and the speed with which somebody who's performing, even if it was only for a short period of time, might be able to demonstrate that they could perform in a way that added more value to the corporation. And if that happens, you have all kinds of people motivated to move around within the organization. The organization then needs to upskill managers to manage new people coming in and through, to reward them for developing them internally. Mm-hmm. It's a whole ecosystem that, is going to be a lot of fun to see if we can do it. And certainly quality assessments are going to be a fundamental means to accomplish that.
So I'll have I got two questions for you, Caitlin, before we let you go. The first one is, outside of obviously plum.io, where would you send somebody who's a TA leader, who's looking to learn more about the validity of assessments for talent mobility or for talent attraction?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, seriously, our website, we've got ebooks that talk about the space in general, which can be helpful. Part of it is that education piece. I also think, we allow people to take the assessment at no cost to try it out themselves, just to get an understanding of how far things have evolved. And Jerry talked about it earlier. You've got to start with a solution that really provides value to that individual. So a TA leader, completing the assessment, seeing the value for them on their own career journey, is really helpful to have that firsthand experience. It kind of demystifies that old perception of what it is. And you can see that the amount of actionable data, and then you start to say, okay, well, if this is valuable to me, would this be valuable to 170,000 people at my organization, or 100 people in my organization, whatever it is. I mean, we have a customer that has deployed this in 26 countries globally to 170,000 employees. And this is step one of retention for them. This is part of onboarding every employee. So I do think that it at least gives them an understanding of how to rethink about this. And then I'd say, there is a Society for Industrial Organizational Psychology. They've got a conference coming up. There seems to be some fear or polarization, where TA leaders and IO psychologists aren't talking to each other. And so not always, but sometimes. And so I think, going down that rabbit hole of looking at things that are on SIOP's website and looking at kind of what are the discussions happening from that side. This is their craft, and there is a science and rigor behind it. And there's a lot of consensus and best practices that are agreed upon there that are good to get familiar with.
I love it. I love it. Good stuff. All right. So Caitlin, my next question, we ask all of our guests this at the end of the show. If you're going to write a book on the state of assessment or the future of assessment for employment, what would you title that book and why?
That is such a great question. You were talking about bringing on funny people before, and I'm like, oh, what's the witty way, to do this something along the lines like, if you want to be people-centric, let's start with understanding your people. Here's the way to do it in an objective, fair, scientific way.
It is the longest book title we've had mentioned, but I do appreciate where you're coming from. Caitlin, who do you give the first signed copy to?
You guys, of course.
Can't give it to us. That's the only rule. Can't give it to us.
The first person I give it to, oh my goodness. That is honestly, my kids. And I'll tell you why.
Wow.
My kids are going to be entering the workforce in the next 10 years. And I don't care if they become doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers. I just want them to find careers that make them happy, fulfilled, and allow them to thrive. And when I look around, I genuinely know that we can help make that happen. And I'm doing this because I want to give them a better future than the current way that people are finding jobs, whether or not it's right out of school or mid-career. We need to be matching people to jobs that allow them to flourish. And as a result, businesses will thrive. And that's what I'm doing.
I love that. That's the feels right there. You got me in the feels. I love that. Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time today. I know you're super busy, and we really appreciate it. We're looking forward to seeing you at Unleash. That's coming up pretty soon. I'm going to put you in the green room. Again, much gratitude. Don't go anywhere. Hang out for a second, will you?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Really quickly, Jerry, on the way out, we want to remind everybody, I think I even have, look at that, whammo, cxr.org/events. So that's going to take you to the calendar if you're listening or watching, cxr.org/events. You're going to find all of the upcoming scheduled events for us. You're also going to find events where Jerry and I will be at. Jerry's got an event coming up where he's speaking. We're doing some roundtable work. We've got a HR.com Endeavor event coming up. So we're excited. We got a bunch of things on the calendar. So check that out. It's not just for the current members, but you can see what's going on there. And then lastly, I'll just remind everybody, because I think we mentioned, check out a book title. There is a new book going on in the book club. How do you get that up there? There it is. That we're actually reading. This is by Greg McCowan. It's called Essentialism. If you haven't seen it already, I encourage you to check it out. You still have time. And the CXR Book Club is actually opened to everybody. So that is wide open if you're in the recruiting space and you want to come in and just sit down. We got a really great readers list that we are curating from our leaders to talk about what's going on in the space and what they think folks should be reading about. Some of those books that are coming in, they're kind of interesting selections, and others are actually pretty no-brainers. So they're going to be kind of fun list for us to go through. Jerry, you got anything else you want to share with everybody before we tell them good night?
In May, I'm taking a delegation along with Barb to Israel.
That's right.
We're going to be checking out Israel from a perspective of their policies, how they engage people to work, how hiring takes place there. We're going to have a lot of interesting professional development meetings. We got about 15 people going to that. So our challenge is figuring out how we can share what we're learning without getting us thrown out of Israel before we want to come back.
And it's not your first delegation. You've done this, for those who are listening. You've done it to Cuba. We've done it to
first delegation of HR to Cuba in 60 years. Yeah. So yes, we've got some really interesting places behind us.
Yeah. Is it too late for people to sign up? Is there still time?
No, I think it's kind of too late.
Hang out for the pictures. And that's what, in the summary.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Good stuff. To everybody who's listening, thanks so much. Don't forget to hit subscribe so we can track the 8 people that are listening, and we appreciate it. We'll see you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the CXR channel. Please subscribe to CXR on your favorite podcast resource and leave us a review while you're at it. Learn more about CXR at our website, cxr.works. Facebook.com and Twitter.com/Career Crossroads, and on Instagram @CareerXroads. We'll catch you next time.